She was a mechanic in a small town, mocked and dismissed for inheriting an old hangar nobody wanted. People whispered behind her back, calling it junk, nothing but rusting scraps from a war everyone had forgotten. But when she pulled open those iron doors, what she uncovered wasn't just a machine. It was her father's final gift. A veteran's last mission, and it was about to silence every single voice that doubted her. The wind pulled at Sloan Mercer's flannel coat as she sat in her dented Jeep outside the lawyer's office, staring at a set of heavy brass keys. They were military issue, tarnished, cold, and weighted with history. They looked like they belonged to something long buried but once vital, maybe like her father himself. Since the funeral, she hadn't spoken to many people. Losing him felt like losing the last link to her past. Her mother had died during Sloan's first tour overseas. And now, at 41, a former Army aviation tech turned small-town mechanic, she had never felt so alone. North Carolina's autumn air carried the bite of burning leaves and pine. It reminded her of quiet mornings on the porch with her father, Walter Mercer, a reserved Air Force veteran who never needed to speak. That silence had meant more than she realized. Now her garage was shuttered, her work gone, and the locals never lined up for a female mechanic, especially not here, where being better than the boys only made them laugh harder. She was grieving, broke, and holding on to keys for land the world dismissed as worthless. But Sloan knew better. The two-lane road wound through empty countryside as she drove toward the property her father had left her, an abandoned airfield nearly 50 miles outside of town. Golden leaves blurred by, but her mind clung to the lawyer's words. It's not worth much. Just an old hangar, scrubland, and some back taxes. He'd slid the brass keys across the desk like they meant nothing, but Sloan felt otherwise. They were too heavy, too deliberate, too carefully kept. When she reached the clearing, her chest tightened. Rising before her was a colossal hangar, metallic and curved like the shell of a sleeping beast. Rust gnawed at its edges, weeds climbed the fence, yet it stood, waiting. She parked, the keys clenched tight in her hand. The place felt heavier than air, almost sacred. The lock was military-grade, and as she fumbled with the keys, her phone buzzed. A text from her cousin, Melanie. "You're not actually wasting time on Dad's junk, are you? Just sell it and move on. You need money, not memories." Sloan ignored it. Her family always believed Walter Mercer was just a quiet old repairman hoarding scraps. But she knew different. His silence carried discipline. His eyes carried weight. He hadn't been guarding junk. He'd been protecting something. The third key turned with a loud click, echoing like a rifle crack in the still air. Chains clattered loose and the hangar doors groaned open. Cold, dry air swept out, laced with the sharp smell of machine oil and polished steel. So familiar it made her freeze. It smelled like her father's garage, only sharper, cleaner, prepared. Her flashlight beam cut through the shadows. Her boots echoed on the concrete until the light struck something massive beneath a canvas tarp. Sleek, long, unmistakably engineered. Not one shape, several. Covered, hidden. Sloane's hand trembled as she brushed a corner of the tarp aside. Beneath was flawless aluminum skin, gleaming, untouched. No rust. No dust. Maintained. She recoiled, breath caught in her throat. "What is this place?" she whispered. This wasn't a junkyard. It wasn't abandoned. It was a facility. At a workbench, every tool was aligned with surgical precision, schematics pinned to corkboards, logbooks stacked neatly. Nothing spoke of a hobbyist tinkering. This was the work of someone on a mission. Her light passed over a photograph. Her father, decades younger, in uniform, standing beside a strange aircraft. The background blurred, secretive. But his face, calm, focused, proud. The truth hit her. This wasn't inheritance. This was responsibility. He had hidden something for decades, and now it was hers to guard. Her phone buzzed again. Melanie insisting, sell it. Don't get sentimental. He wasted his life on this. Sloan clenched her jaw. Looking around at the spotless benches, the military manuals, the sealed fuel drums, this wasn't wasted time. This was devotion. Her father hadn't squandered his life. He'd dedicated it to something the world wasn't ready for, and now so would she. She stepped closer to the covered aircraft and whispered, "All right, Dad." What were you protecting? And why me? The wind howled through the hangar doors as though answering. At dawn, Sloane returned with coffee, her toolbox, and questions heavy as stone. Frost glazed the concrete. The building loomed in silence, waiting. She walked into that metallic stillness, reverent as if entering a temple. Yesterday, she hadn't dared uncover the tarp. Today, she would. Her fingers shook as she unclasped the military fasteners one by one. Slowly, reverently, she pulled the heavy canvas away. What lay beneath stole her breath. A sleek aircraft unlike anything she'd ever seen. Razor nose, twin engines pressed close, matte black skin designed not to be noticed. It wasn't forgotten, it was hidden. On its side, XJ-42A Nighthawk, NATO ID, classified. What in God's name? She muttered, pressing her hand against the cold metal. Every panel was pristine, every seam tight. She peered into the cockpit, controls far more advanced than anything she'd handled in the Army. This wasn't restoration. This was readiness. Her phone rang, jolting her. She fumbled to answer. The name on the screen flashed. Her godson. Hey, she answered, trying to sound casual. Aunt Sloane, his voice was tight. Are you okay? Yeah, I'm out at the property. Melanie posted on Facebook that you're digging through Grandpa's stuff. Said you're trying to play soldier again. Sloane let out a long breath. She doesn't know what she's talking about. Logan hesitated. Can I come out there? Sloane blinked. Why? I don't know. I don't know. I miss Grandpa. And I miss you. Her throat tightened. Yeah, come on out. 20 minutes later, a beat-up Honda crept up the gravel path. Logan stepped out, tall and awkward in his hoodie and boots, like a boy fumbling his way into manhood without a map. When he entered the hangar, he froze. What the hell? He whispered. Is that a jet? Sloane folded her arms. Grandpa's. No way. Yes way. He circled the aircraft slowly, all widening his eyes. This is military grade. Better than anything I've worked on. No records, no trace online. Whatever this is, it was designed to disappear. Then he looked at her, a spark igniting. You think it flies? Sloane hesitated. Everything here says he kept it flight ready. Tools, manuals, hydraulic fluid, sealed drums of aviation fuel. She paused, voice dropping. He was doing something, Logan, for decades. And none of us knew. They stood in silence until a crackle echoed across the hangar. Sloane stiffened. Did you hear that? Yeah, Logan whispered. That wasn't us. A faint electric hum stirred from the back wall. They moved cautiously toward it. A green light blinked on a console she swore had been dark before. Old wires ran into the concrete, still alive with power. Sloane approached. One button pulsed faintly. Comms active. Her hand hovered. Do I push it? She whispered. Logan shrugged. You inherited the place. She drew a breath and pressed. Static burst through the speakers. Then, Nighthawk Base, this is Control 1, requesting monthly status report. Confirm asset integrity, over. Sloane jerked back, heart pounding. The voice wasn't a recording. It was live. Someone still thought this place was operational and expected Walter Mercer to answer. Her voice cracked as she leaned in. Control 1, this is Sloane Mercer. My father passed away 3 months ago. I don't know who you are, but silence. Then a clipped reply, acknowledged. Stand by for further instructions. The panel dimmed. The air seemed to thicken, the whole hangar holding its breath. Logan turned to her. What just happened? Sloane shook her head, pulse racing. I think Grandpa was part of something still active, and now they think it's me. That night's sleep never came. The radio's words looped in her head, requesting monthly status report. Confirm asset integrity. Someone out there had been waiting for her father. Someone with authority. And now they were waiting for her. At her small duplex kitchen table, Sloane sat with cold coffee beside a yellowed envelope. Inside were her father's service records, schematics, and tucked deep inside, a letter marked for Sloane, when you're ready. Her hands shook as she opened it. My girl, if you're reading this, then I'm no longer around to explain in person. I know I left you more questions than answers, and I'm sorry. Some things I couldn't tell you. Not because I didn't trust you. God knows I always did. But because they weren't mine to share. The hangar, the aircraft, the work. It wasn't just mine. It was entrusted to me. I protected it because it had the power to help people if it ever got the chance. Now it's yours. You always had the skills, but more importantly, you had the heart. If they reach out to you, listen carefully. There are good people out there, quiet people. People who believe, like I did, that not everything good should be buried because politics got scared. I love you. I've always been proud of you. Dad, tears blurred her eyes. All her life, she had believed her father was distant, more married to machines than family. But now she understood. He wasn't cold. He was carrying a secret too heavy to share. He hadn't been tinkering on old engines for fun. He had been safeguarding classified assets for the day the world might need them again. And now that duty belonged to her. By morning, Sloan was back at the hangar. Mist clung to the air. Dew slicked the steel doors. Logan was already pacing outside, a thermos of cocoa in hand. I couldn't stop thinking about that voice, he admitted. This is way bigger than you inheriting a building. I know. Sloan walked toward the jet, her steps steady. I'm not here as a daughter anymore. I'm here because I was chosen. Together they dug deeper. In a hidden back room beneath crates, they uncovered a second panel. Inside, encrypted files, repair logs, schematics, not just of the jet, but advanced evolutions of it. Handwritten notes filled the margins, some her father's, others unknown. Then came the folder. Project Nexus Contingency Plan. One phrase repeated again and again. Humanitarian deployment readiness pending civilian authorization. Logan blinked. These jets weren't just for the military. They were meant for disaster zones, Sloan whispered. No runways, no support. Just in and out, medical drops, evacuations, comms relays, life-saving missions. They stared at the jet with new eyes, not as a weapon, but as a lifeline. A giant built for good, buried under years of secrecy and doubt. Sloan exhaled slowly. Everyone thought Dad wasted his life, but he was protecting something the world might still need. Later that day, Logan stepped outside for a call while Sloan stayed behind, combing through 37 years of maintenance records. Then the radio snapped to life again. Nighthawk Base, Control 1, confirmation requested. Status report pending. Last successful contact, 3 months prior. Sloan stared at the microphone. Her hand trembled above it. Then she pressed. Control 1. This is Sloan Mercer, Walter Mercer's daughter. I've inherited the facility. The aircraft is secure and maintained, awaiting instructions. There was silence on the line, then, understood. Stand by. Assessment team en route. Her blood ran cold. Assessment team, she whispered. Sloan turned toward the open hangar doors. The wind outside had risen, clouds gathering on the horizon. A storm was coming, both in the sky and in her life. This wasn't just an old relic. It wasn't just a secret. It was alive. And now she wasn't just a mechanic. She was the unwilling guardian of her father's legacy, something the world wasn't supposed to remember, something that could still alter lives if she dared to protect it. The convoy arrived just before noon. 3 black SUVs crawled up the dirt road to the hangar, tires crunching over gravel, antennas sticking out like thorns. The first vehicle stopped, and a woman in a dark blazer stepped out with practiced authority. Her blonde hair was cut short, mirrored aviators shielding her eyes. She moved like someone used to commanding a room without a word. Sloan Mercer? She asked. Sloan nodded, hands buried in her mechanic's jacket, grease still on her sleeves. That's me. I'm Agent Malene Cross, Department of Defense Liaison for Dormant Asset Recovery. I believe your father, Walter Mercer, was the last civilian custodian of this facility. That's what I've come to understand, Sloan said carefully. Agent Cross's eyes shifted past her, pausing on the aircraft's covered outline in the hangar. We need to talk. They sat inside the hangar office, a folding table between them, the buzz of portable lights throwing long shadows across the walls. Miss Mercer, Agent Cross began. I'll be direct. You are in possession of federal property tied to a discontinued military program. Our agency didn't even realize the aircraft had survived decommissioning until 3 months of missed reports triggered surveillance protocols. Sloan leaned forward. My father never told me anything. I didn't even know this place existed until the will. But I've seen the files, maintenance logs, contracts, receipts. This wasn't theft. He was assigned to protect them. Cross hesitated, then nodded. We've reviewed the records you sent, and you're right. Your father didn't steal these aircraft. If anything, he may have been the last one to take them seriously. Sloan frowned. Then why are you here to take them back? Cross gave a thin smile. That depends on you. She slid a red folder across the table. Inside were schematics, memos, and one page that made Sloan's pulse quicken, a contingency contract naming Walter Mercer as custodial engineer of record for Project Nexus, with a clause she had missed. In the event of the custodian's death and no federal reassignment, guardianship may be considered hereditary, pending performance assessment. Sloan's eyes widened. You mean this was meant to pass down unofficially? Yes. Project Nexus was shut down under political pressure. Too expensive, too unconventional, too humanitarian, Cross said with a trace of irony. But your father believed in it. And he wasn't the only one. She leaned closer. We've been monitoring this facility since his death. Not just for security, but to see how you'd handle it. Sloan's throat tightened. You've been watching me. You answered the radio. You didn't sell the hangar. You didn't leak to the press. You kept it all secure. That tells us you're not just a mechanic. You know when something bigger than yourself lands in your lap. Sloan let that hang between them. So what now? Cross opened another folder. This one held blueprints for mobile trauma units, disaster relief modules, supply drop systems. These aircraft were designed for more than war, Cross explained. They were built to go where no aid could reach. Earthquakes, floods, combat zones with civilians trapped. Quiet, fast, invisible. Sloan's gaze dropped to the papers. And you're saying now the world's ready? Cross nodded. Climate crises are escalating. Conflicts are displacing millions. There's renewed interest in rapid response humanitarian technology. What we need is someone who understands both the machines and the mission. She slid the final page forward. A proposal. Civilian partnership for experimental aid deployment. Lead technical custodian, Sloan Mercer. The weight of it hit hard. All her life, she had been dismissed, mocked, told she didn't belong in a male-dominated trade. Now she was staring at proof, not just of her father's vision, but of her own worth. She looked up. If I say yes, what does that mean? It means funding, discretion, risk, and it means giving these aircraft a purpose. Slowly, Sloan rose and glanced at the jet under its tarp. The wind shifted, peeling back a corner to reveal gleaming steel. Her voice was steady. Then let's bring them back to life. The first time she climbed into the cockpit alone, she held her breath for 10 seconds. Her hands brushed over the instrument panel, marveling at its pristine state. Her father hadn't just preserved a machine, he had preserved a mission, and now it was hers. Outside, a cold wind stirred leaves across the concrete. Inside, silence weighed heavy with meaning. Adjusting the worn leather seat, Sloan whispered, You really built a legacy, didn't you, Dad? For the first time in years, she wasn't fixing someone else's broken dream. She was building something new. The days blurred into long hours of focused work. Sloan split her time between her father's technical notes, reconditioning systems, and collaborating with Cross, who brought in engineers, tech experts, even a few quiet ex-military staff from Project Nexus. But she wasn't just rebuilding aircraft, she was rebuilding herself. Each morning, she walked the hangar floor before dawn, coffee in hand, reciting checklists like prayers. By noon, Logan arrived, eager, notebook ready, peppering her with questions about turbines and hydraulics. For the first time, Sloan actually wanted to teach. Her hands grew calloused again, not from patch jobs or brake repairs, but from testing avionics, calibrating fuel systems, and restoring machines meant for missions the world had abandoned. One evening after 10 hours straight, she slumped against the wall, sweat dripping. Watching Logan across the hangar, "You know," she said, brushing her forehead, "when I came back from the service, I thought the hardest part would be fitting in again." "Was it?" Logan asked. "No," she said quietly. "The hardest part was feeling like I'd already lived the best years of my life. Like I'd peaked in uniform and everything after was just surviving." Logan said nothing, just nodded. "But now," she added, looking at the massive aircraft and the tools spread across the benches. I don't feel that way anymore. This place wasn't just a hangar. It was proof the past didn't have to die quietly. The real test came when the first aircraft powered on. It was late. Only Sloan and Logan were there. They'd replaced the fuel regulator, checked every line. Her fingers hovered over the ignition, trembling as though touching memory itself. Then she turned the switch. The engine roared alive with a deep, clean hum so powerful it shook the concrete under her boots. Lights on the console blinked on one after another. Sloan stepped back, eyes wide. "She's alive," she whispered. Logan stood frozen beside her. That's unbelievable." Together they stared at the glowing aircraft, its systems casting long shadows across the hangar walls. Sloan brushed away a tear before it fell. He kept it alive for decades, and now we've brought it back. She didn't crave applause, headlines, or recognition. This moment was hers and her father's, but word has a way of spreading. By the end of the week, quiet whispers rippled through military circles, humanitarian networks, and academic halls. People who remembered Project Nexus reached out. Retired colonels, engineers, historians. Some offered technical expertise, others legal guidance. A few just sent handwritten letters. One letter stood out. "We fought to keep that program alive. They shut us down. Thank you for proving we weren't crazy to believe in it." Sloan pinned it above her workstation. Her father's legacy was no longer hidden. It was becoming a cause. By the time the first humanitarian demonstration flight was cleared, Sloan hadn't just restored an aircraft. She had restored belief in what it could achieve. She no longer felt like a mechanic. She felt like a commander. The sky over southern Louisiana was choked with smoke and dust. 3 days earlier, a chemical plant explosion had ignited wildfires that outpaced emergency crews. Rural towns were stranded, roads blocked, hospitals overwhelmed, cell towers silent. Convoys stalled miles away, but not her team. From the edge of a forgotten airstrip, Sloan Mercer stood beside the XJ-42A Nighthawk as its turbines roared. Months of restoration, preparation, and quiet defiance had led to this moment. Agent Cross handed her a tablet. 4 drop zones. Emergency water filters, solar lanterns, medkits, thermal blankets, field radios. You've got 1 hour of fuel in and out. Copy that, Sloan replied without hesitation. A nervous young volunteer approached. "Ma'am, are you sure this thing can fly?" "It's not exactly standard issue." Sloan gave a wry smile, tightening her gloves. "Neither am I." She climbed into the cockpit, strapped herself in, and scanned the skeletal airfield. For the first time in decades, it felt alive. The turbines whined. The Nighthawk lifted, not just into the air, but into history. 40 minutes later, she skimmed low over a rural town. Smoke curled from treetops. Power lines dangled. Entire neighborhoods were silent. Families stood in open fields, waving frantically. Some needed medicine. Others clean water. Sloan flicked the panel switch. The first crate dropped. Its chute snapped open and floated gently to the ground. Children ran toward it, pointing as parents rushed behind in disbelief. A second crate. A third. She didn't wave. She didn't announce herself. She just did what needed to be done. Before banking west, Sloan saw a barefoot woman holding a child raise one trembling hand in silent gratitude. That was enough. That night, news alerts lit up every screen. Unidentified aircraft delivers aid to Louisiana disaster zone. Survivors call it the Angel Jet. Photos surfaced. The Nighthawk's shadow caught mid-flight. Headlines speculated everything from a billionaire-funded prototype to a covert military project. Conspiracy forums exploded. The Department of Defense stayed silent. Sloan said nothing. Standing in the hangar doorway, arms folded, she watched the storm fade into stars. Logan came up beside her, phone in hand. "You've gone viral." "Let them wonder," she murmured. He grinned. "You really flew a ghost out of the grave, huh?" Sloan smirked. "Not a ghost. A promise. So what now?" Logan asked. Her eyes drifted to the jet, cooling beneath the lights. "Now," she said, "we rebuild it all. Not just the machines, the mission." Weeks blurred into months. Requests poured in from NGOs, relief agencies, even quiet military contacts overseas. No one asked for weapons. They wanted speed, precision, hope. Sloan's hangar became what no one believed possible. A civilian-run humanitarian flight center, born from discarded technology and one woman's refusal to let the past die. They called it the Mercer Project. Volunteers arrived daily, mechanics, pilots, logisticians. People too old, too unconventional, too idealistic. Sloan welcomed them all just as her father had once welcomed purpose. On the first anniversary of Walter Mercer's death, Sloan placed a brass plaque on the wall. "To Walter Mercer, you were right to believe we could do better." She looked at the aircraft, no longer hidden under tarps, no longer buried in shadows. It stood proud, ready, like her. Some inherit money, others land. Sloan inherited a mission and turned it into a movement. As long as there were people forgotten, storms to outrun, or places the world refused to see, Sloan Mercer would be there. Not for glory, not for credit, but because one man's last wish had reminded her of who she really was. A mechanic, a daughter, a guardian of light in a darkening world. Anyone could rebuild the forgotten, if they were willing to get their hands dirty and believe when no one else would. As the sun slipped below the Carolina hills, Sloan set her wrench aside and opened her father's flight log. Not to record repairs, but to draft the first page of a training program for young women and veterans who had been told they didn't belong. This time, they would hear something different. The hangar wasn't just her inheritance anymore. It was a beacon for every overlooked genius, every underdog with grease on their hands, every dreamer mocked into silence. The woman once ridiculed for fixing machines in a man's world had become the pilot of something greater. For Sloan Mercer, the sky was never the limit. It was only the runway.